next thing I know, I'm, sleeping, and I wake up to Jake, again, the assistant engineer who's downstairs, just saying in a very soft, careful voice, "Hey guys, bit of an emergency situation." And Nicolette had her AirPods in, and Andy was like snoring too loud to be woken with this nonsense. And so it was just me at first. And I was like, whoa, like what's going on? What's going on? This is only 2 hours after we went to sleep, by the way. This is like 6 a.m. We went to bed at like 4 or something. No, went to bed at like 3, woke up at like 4:30 or 5 or some shit like that. And I was like, what? And he was like, so the studio is flooding. And I was just like, oh, okay.
Hey everybody, welcome to the final episode of Season 4 of The Record Process. For this one, we are joined by Christine Goodwin. She's the vocalist and guitarist of the Tallahassee, Florida-based band Pool Kids, and she joins us to talk about the band's 2022 self-titled album. The story behind this record is a wild ride, and we get into all of it. We talk about how the band linked up with producer Vernon Davis, and how they knew that he was the right fit for them as a band. Christine talks about bearing her soul while she was working through a very painful breakup while writing the lyrics to this record. And she talks about the difficulties that the band faced in finding a balance and workflows that worked for everyone. And just as the band was hitting their stride in the studio, we talk about how tragedy struck and how the band managed to get the record finished against all odds. We talk about all the gear that the band lost during a massive flood that nearly stopped the record in its tracks, and how finally getting the chance to listen back to the finished record made it all worthwhile. The remarkable story behind this record, all its twists and turns, are coming up right now. So many of the albums that we'll be highlighting this season on The Record Process share one very important theme, and that's the idea of technology helping musicians and creators overcome the collaborative restrictions that once came along with geographic location. Thanks to companies like Audio Movers, real-time remote audio production and the tools that make it possible are more powerful than ever. Their groundbreaking Listen To plugin allows you to stream, record, and collaborate on high-quality audio in real time and is used on a daily basis by world-class audio engineers and professionals at places like Capitol and Abbey Road Studios. Their new Pro plan allows you to stream up to 150 users simultaneously, includes custom branding, and even allows you to stream MIDI data in real time. So head on over to audiomovers.com and enter the code RECORDPRO to get 1 month free off your Pro membership today. So as you already know, we do a lot of talking about the creation of original music here on The Record Process. I mean, that's kind of our thing. But it can also be fun to put your own spin on an old classic and tell the world something else about yourself through something like a cover song. Cover songs can be a really interesting way to connect with your existing fan base, or even a way to put yourself in front of new audiences through shared musical tastes. And our friends at DistroKid have made it super simple to upload a cover of your favorite song while allowing them to handle all of the back-end licensing work that can really be a headache for independent artists. DistroKid will notify the composer and publisher of its release, they will pay the necessary licensing fee, and they will take care of all the other legal red tape involved with releasing a cover song on a streaming platform, allowing you to fully focus on enjoying the process of putting your unique artistic spin on that recording. If you're already a DistroKid member, you can access this as you're uploading your track for $12 a year per song. Or if you're not yet a member and you'd like to sign up for DistroKid, you can use the link in our show notes to get 30% off of your first year's membership. Christine Goodwin from Pool Kids, hello. Thank you for joining us on The Record Process. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, amazing. We've been looking forward to this one very much. Well, the record we're going to talk about, self-titled, is awesome. So that's to start with why we're here. But we spent some time. We've gotten to see Pool Kids live plenty. And the project itself has a really interesting arc and just a great group of humans. I got to start off by saying that.
Thank you.
if anybody goes and listens to this record afterwards and is not familiar with them, it I think is important to know that they're very sound and wonderful human beings that are making that music. So that's number one, Tom. Very important. And I don't think we touch on it enough.
Yeah, not quite enough.
But we're starting off strong with it here. But we are very thankful that you have made some time to talk through this. I'm sure you've been doing a couple interviews and talking through it. And it was, pseudo spoiler alert, it was a bit of a traumatic experience to get this record over the finish line. But we will get there. You're going to have to wait through all the setup. Or I guess you can press the fast forward button. But don't do that. Yeah, but don't do that because there's so much more that went into this ahead of time. So, Christine, why don't we set the stage a bit for this record and LP by just bringing everybody up real quick, like Cliff Note style, to where y'all were at heading into kind of starting the process of writing this new record, right? Because, so obviously previous material and how the band came together.
Right. The very, very beginning of the writing process for this record was actually before our debut record, Music to Practice Safe Sex To. Before that was even out. I think we might have even still actually been recording when I had started writing for this record. Arm's Length, I think, was the very, very first song. And so that was like 2017.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really long turnaround time.
You're not alone with that. I'm sure there were a couple people who probably had a few delays for certain reasons.
Right. Honestly, even without COVID, I think it still would have taken us this long. But
yeah,
regardless, it was, the band started with just Caden and I, and it took us a long time to find like the perfect bassist that was like equally as good of a person as she was a musician. That was like our main goal, was just like someone that's not going to fuck us over. So we finally found her, locked it down. Rest was history with that. Then we had gone through a couple guitarists that were touring with us, and they just had other, life priorities, very amicable with both the guitarists. But then we found Andy Anaya and got him on board. He started touring with us, and we really were just squeezing the life out of those 9 songs on the debut and touring for years. And before we had really realized that we all had to come together in person to finish the songs. I was in like postal service mode, where I was just gradually working on demos, demoing them myself, sending them to the band's chat, thinking that it would be like, oh, I sent some, you sent some back, yada, yada, yada. And it took me far, far too long to just realize / accept that, like, okay, this group of 4 individuals has to be in person in order to get something like this done. So we didn't do that for the first time, like actually get together, until December. Andy's the one I always have answer the dates because I have such a bad log of this in my head. December of, oh gosh, I'm not even going to give a year, but it was years. And we had our first writing session. And yeah, finally got to have like full band input, other people besides just myself, like bringing stuff to the table and changing the songs around.
Again, I can totally relate to that dynamic and needing that kind of real-time in-person feedback, whether it's verbal, physical, right? Weird facial expressions. I'm sure some of those were thrown around.
And it's funny because I personally am the opposite. Like when I'm in person, I can't come up with ideas when I'm sitting in a room with someone like looking at me. Like I have to shut myself into like a closet to be able to like think through. So, but we've figured out how to balance it where it's like I sit down in my closet and come up with like, stuff. And then when we get in person, Andy helps like complete the thought, and, Caden, everyone else brings their stuff to the table. And so it works out that way. But I'm rarely coming up with anything like in person. My work is kind of beforehand. And then, I don't know. It's interesting the way different bands operate differently.
No, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you coming up with like lyrics and melodies at that point too? Or is that like part of the after everything's already
It's always guitar with vocals and melody, but then like there's circumstances where Andy had come up, like for That's Physics Baby, Andy came to the table with like the guitar parts, the tapping riff, and like the chords. And then he came to the table with that. And then I like restructured some stuff and said like, okay, the chorus has to be in 4/4. Like we got to have something that people can bop their heads to. Like would make some changes like that. And like, yeah. So then it was like he brought the chords to the table for that one. Normally I bring, it depends. Some songs I'll like flesh out the whole thing and then they add instruments. And then sometimes I'll have like a really, really like basic idea. And then everyone else helps make it like more interesting and change things around. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of how the ideas started coming together, you know, musically, right? Melodically. Let's talk about some of the backstory, like some of the inspiration for this and how you as a songwriter started working through and visualizing some of those themes and concepts and how you wanted to approach it.
I have a hard time. I wish I had the ability to like see a record as a whole, like beforehand. Like I want to talk about these like themes and like consistent things. And so I definitely didn't go into it being like, oh, I'm getting inspiration from this and I'm going to explore this deeply. It sort of was just like, I have a note in my phone that I have had going since probably 2016 of like any thought that I get that could be worthy of being a lyric remotely. It's a massive doc. I'm constantly thinking about how do I get away from everything just being in this note? Because I have to scroll for so long to get to the bottom to add a thought.
You should send us a screen recording video of just you
I
all
might,
the way through it.
Yeah. Actually, except I don't want anyone to pause it and then steal my lyrics.
Oh, that's true. That's a great point. Yeah, you'd have to redact everything. Well,
yeah. Well, maybe if we blur it, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Just show the length.
There we
just
go.
Like,
we just want the length because it's totally like just the entire printer ream that is just spit out, you know, like.
Yeah, I would love for the people to see that.
Man, but I do know how that works too, because you just like you have one. What's your preferred? Is it what do you use? Do you use like Evernote? Do you have a different app or just like the notes?
No, it's literally just the notes. Like I'll actually give you a brief look right here. Hang on.
Oh my God, here we go. Tom, it's happening.
Oh, wow.
It's still going. We're still going. It got longer.
Yeah.
It's loading more. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there it is.
So it really was just from 2016 to whenever we recorded, it was just me sort of taking, because a lot of times the lyrics come last. And sometimes when I need like I don't know, I'm like, okay, I have the melody for the chorus, but I need lyrics to fit it. And I'll literally just consult that note and be like, which like has, I don't know, words that can flow with this. And so I'm kind of just pulling from that. But there did end up being some consistencies. I was going through a breakup that was the type of breakup. It really doesn't sound like this through the lyrics in the album. It sounds like it was this horrible toxic relationship, but it was really more of, I was dating my high school sweetheart / college sweetheart. It was like a 7-year relationship, and we had mutually agreed that the relationship had sort of just evolved into a friendship, I guess. A very great friendship that we both didn't want to let go, which is why we had been hanging on for years. But that type of breakup, I think sometimes can almost be worse than the toxic kind, because you can just hate the person and cut them out. But I don't know. It was a very, very painful thing for a little while. And a lot of the hateful lyrics come from either, okay, there's like 2 different explanations for that. One is during the first like 2 weeks after we had decided to break up, I was doing this weird kind of stupid thing where I was like making a list of all the negative things about him that I didn't like to like hyperfixate on about him and our relationship, just to make it like easier to, I'm like, okay, I'll be able to better adjust living without him if I like just focus on how much I hate going to the fucking grocery store with him. Like that, it was torture going to the grocery store with this man. And I, you know, things like that. And so some of the lyrics came from like that perspective when I was in the mindset of like focusing on trying to like all those negative things. And then they also came from a place of like, I would take things from other parts of my life, like say I was angry at, I don't know, a friend or something. And then instead of just writing about anger with that friend and explaining that, I would just sort of create a story that was around the relationship I was talking about, but make it like fictional and like put that hate into like, oh, I'm talking about the person that this breakup song is about. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but I was like applying feelings, like emotions that I was feeling in real life. I was applying them to this story sort of about a relationship.
That makes a ton of sense. That makes incredible. And I think that's a really tough, that's why I asked too, because it's a really tough thing. And the record is very dynamic and polarizing, and there are complexities there that aren't necessarily black and white from an emotional standpoint. Right. And so I think it's interesting that I assume this was a different list. This was a different note. The list of things you hated was not in that, but eventually it's,
it was much shorter.
Parts of it slowly made its way over to that other note in one way or another. Right. So I think that's easy and very understandable, but also really powerful, because the songs on this record, and in that way, I think the goal of any song, piece of music is to evoke some sort of response, right? To evoke something within whoever's listening to it, that they can kind of latch onto and relate to. And I think those much more nuanced, complex, kind of like almost like the cognitive dissonance of being an uncertainty in that way is really tough to nail down. So that's interesting that you kind of, it was born out of this like almost breakup action of like something you could picture somebody doing, but not for all of the exact reasons,
right.
Which I think is really interesting and speaks a lot. And when you listen to the record, it feels that way. It doesn't feel like a fuck you, I hate
right.
you, Taylor Swift, single
exactly.
about how shitty this guy is. So I think that's really cool and really personal to kind of take that and then also, access those emotions and then supplement the story.
Yeah, it's been crazy. We have like a Pool Kids Discord now, which is cool. Like seeing people, I don't know, getting to talk to like fans more and stuff. And they, it's really crazy how some of the people there have sort of had a chance to describe, like, they're like, oh, this song really gets to me because I went through this, and this. And it'll be like play by play exactly what I went through. And I'm like, it is so crazy, like with all the complexities that we're talking about. Like it wasn't just, oh, I went through a fuck you breakup and I related to this, which those people are there too, but people will be like, oh, I was in a really long not long distance, I was in a really long relationship with my high school sweetheart and we decided to blah blah blah, and it's just exactly what I just explained to you. And I'm like, that is crazy that's what I went through. I made this thing and it reached you and it clicked with you because you went through that same exact thing. It's just like really crazy.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's, and that's the thing too. I think it can be very, very easy, like trying to write a song, trying to access it and say, ooh, I want to cast the widest net. So like, I'll take an experience of mine and just kind of like distill it down to something that everybody can understand,
right.
When actually a lot of times it's what you're talking about. It's the inverse, and just speaking really specifically, like you're like, you know what, maybe one person out there will actually know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to describe it so viscerally and use this imagery. And then look at that. It hits everybody way harder.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy how the more niche and honest you get, like you end up hitting more people. It's sort of like, I don't know if y'all are on TikTok.
I technically have one, but to be on it for any great length of time, I wouldn't say that's what I'm doing.
Well, I'm not going to reference a specific video or anything, but like people talk about like they'll post something that will be the most niche thought that like you feel like, and I don't know, people always joke like, wow, I have never had an original thought. And it's like they'll post the most specific thing ever and it'll like blow up and get 5 million people saying like, oh my God, like same here. And it's just funny, like, because people do try to cash this wide, vague net, but like people are complex and your issues are more common than you think they are.
And so many people sit inside their own heads. I was just listening to like just this, a statistic where I think like more than ever we live so much of our lives inside of our own head. Whereas once upon a time, the great motivator was, okay, cool, I got to now run away from this thing that's trying to kill me. Okay. And so now that it stops, we're just here. We have like safety, shelter. We're like, everything starts to just go nuts up there. And shocker, we've all been and treaded over some of the same ground up there, in the course of a day-to-day thing. And it's picking out and pulling out those things, even when you don't think someone can relate. And
exactly.
And honestly, for you as a songwriter too, in general, it's having that bravery to kind of put those out there, because there is always that chance of, will anybody? I mean, did you grapple with that where you're like, is this too specific? Is it, did you care? Obviously, like you want people to enjoy the songs and relate, but what were your thoughts going into that as you started to unpack some of these songs in full lyrically?
That actually, I had a lot of concerns and fears. People not relating to it was, for whatever reason, not really one of them. I wasn't too stressed about that. I'm not sure why. I think even though I do address such like specific, weird, complex things in it, I think there's still so many vague moments too. Like the Physics Baby chorus, it's literally just telling you what I need over and over again. I'm like, you can kind of apply any emotional situation to that.
But you kind of need that sometimes too, to balance out some of that heavy and some of that, that real, complex like depth, because it's almost just like, that's part of the headspace too. It's just kind of like bouncing around and just getting in that loop. So I love that you used, a lot of like really interesting songwriting tools like that along the way too, because you could just like go the Bob Dylan route and Willie Nelson and be like, I'm going to tell this entire story front to back. It's going to be 6 minutes long. Forget about a hook. You get one tagline. You know what I mean? Like I'm telling you a story. Sit down and listen.
Sit down, motherfuckers.
Which I mean, I'd pay to see that version of this record from you as well. But I do think I would prefer the way it came out here. Yeah.
That was a big, like definitely top 3 primary goal of mine was to have hooks and have like very accessible, not just the lyrics, mostly with like musically, was to have, I don't know, more pop elements, I guess. And because it can be so easy to go down the, with such like competent musicians, like my bandmates are so great at their instruments. It's like easy to go down the rabbit hole of just like trying to make something musically interesting, aka technical, aka only people that listen to math rock are gonna listen to it. You know what I mean? So I wanted to make sure that we were like, I don't know, I just wanted to write some catchy shit. So I was very adamant about having that stuff.
So where did you find the line for that? What did some of those conversations? Because anybody, Mr. Andy Anaya, I mean, you leave that man alone to his devices and a guitar,
right?
But so because you mentioned like kind of jostling back and forth, it's like, okay, we need something in like a duple meter to latch on to, to balance it out. What was that process like on a song to song, section to section basis? And did you have kind of like a filter or a test for whether it was too far or not far enough?
I feel like the filter element was pretty simple. Also, it wasn't too difficult in terms of like the conversations, because honestly, I think everyone was sort of on the same page. I think the perfect example is the Physics Baby chorus that I already mentioned. In the end of the song, the chorus, it has like a couple extra, I don't know, it's like not in 4/4, I think. There's like, I don't know, it gets kind of weird. It like hangs on a note. And that was like the way that it was originally when Andy brought it to the table. And then when I was trying to work out a melody for it, for like the chorus, I was like, damn, like this just doesn't, there was like, I don't know. I was just like, I got the feeling of like, okay, but if it were like this, like that's when I'm really like bopping my head. And I remember thinking I was going to get like pushback, and I like sent Andy this like video recording of like the idea. And I was like, okay, like hear me out. Like, I really think the chorus should be in 4/4 because then the melody can be like this. And I like sang it for him and stuff. And I thought it was going to be like this, like, struggle, but he was just like, yeah. And he was like, wait, but can we just do it that way at the end? And I was like, yes, that would actually be sick. And it would be really cathartic to have it at the end. So yeah, it was sort of just like conversations like that, where it was like, you know, when I would be pulling, or when we would be pulling a song together, if there was a moment where it was like, ooh, but if it were like this, it would be really catchy. And then we would just change it to that type thing.
That's awesome. And isn't it interesting too, you know, in that moment, always kind of assuming that it's like, they're going to hate this. And the lesson there, I think, is if there are people that you trust and you're going in, don't always assume, you know, like, I have it pegged. I mean, we have plenty of jokes with like within Wonder Years, like writing sessions, you know, that I think a lot of people would be like, okay, cool. Nick's going to bring like the angular, more dissonant, weird, like too many passing tones or not, you know, not enough, like, you know, and there's an art to that Nick loves that. He writes a lot of that stuff. And then, you know, some others might be like, Casey's definitely going to want that pop. You know, he's gonna want to like water it down, distill it down to the purest, like, you know, physical, like, you know, like kind of bop centric nucleus of it or whatever. But there's room for both of that on both sides of us. So I think we've learned over the years, just like you're talking about, that there have been times that I've been surprised. I've been like, Michael's gonna hate this. Yeah. He's gonna literally hate this. He's like, no, that kind of fucks. I'm like,
yeah.
Whoa,
like, yes.
You're supposed to hate this. I was gearing up to like pull out the whiteboard and be like, no, here's why it works
with your
so
like
well.
thesis on why it's good.
I promise you it's great. Let me.
It's like, wow, you're not just limited to this like tiny box I put you in.
And it's a really important thing, and so I love that you brought that up too, because you know, that's kind of how you keep pushing things down the line and creating that kind of like that safe space in there, without like, you know, kind of being like, they'll never like this. I'll never get this past them. It's like, you don't actually know that. So you got to throw it out there to see what happens. However, sometimes you get into a situation where maybe it's split 50-50, right? You know, maybe you're all just like on a fence, right?
Right.
And that's when it helps to sometimes bring in an outside, unbiased, creative collaborator.
Is this where Mike enters the chat?
I'm so glad you picked up on my transition. Yes, and y'all did just that. Who was it? Tell us where you went next once you had these songs kind of like raring and ready to go.
It was Mike Vernon Davis, who we cannot recommend enough. If you want, I don't know, anyone that just wants to make a sick record, go knock on his door. Review. Yeah, I just like all the positive things I could possibly say, just like insert them there. Yeah, we were drawn to him because of the Great Grandpa 4 of Arrows record and the Special Explosions record that he did. Yeah, we just had a couple talks with him, a couple like, you know, little Zoom interview types things. And I remember him asking us like, what do you want in terms of maximalism? Because one of the things I said was, I don't want to stray too far from the original Pool Kids sound. And when I said that, I just meant like, I still want to keep it technical. Like, I don't want to be too poppy. I want pop elements, but I don't want to disappoint, you know, the people that are into guitars.
Right. Everyone in the room here.
Yeah. So I remember saying that, and I think he really clung onto that. So then he was like, oh, and for context for listeners, the first record was really just guitars, bass, drums, vocals, like very minimal. And I remember Mike asking like, so what are you thinking in terms of like the scale of like minimalism to maximalism? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like production, you know, like synth and percussion and all these like bells and whistles. And I was like, oh, maximalism to the fucking extreme, like pedal to the metal maximalism. And we all like agreed on that. And he was like, oh, okay, sick. Cause he was like, you know, he wanted to do that. And then he thought that we just wanted to be like, I don't know. So that was funny.
See, he had some assumptions of his own, and that's why in that conversation, yeah, it's funny. Was there a moment in that conversation, right, or like that few, like you're vetting, kind of feeling each other out? You know, he's trying to wrap his head around the vision where y'all want to take it, and you were trying to like kind of do the same thing. Like, is this our guy? Were there moments where you were like, "That's it, I know it"?
I remember he was like definitely saying all the right things in all of our talks. I think just after like maybe our second conversation with him or something, he just really was saying all the right shit, and we were just like, yeah, like this is our guy. And then we like worked out budget and got it squared away, and we were just like, but even still, after we agreed to have him on board, when we were driving out, because we just drove our minivan from, I guess, Chicago to Seattle. So we're driving across the country and, you know, spending every penny we had, like literally when Pool Kids started playing DIY tours in like 2017 that I was just booking for us, like super DIY. We had been saving from that first show all the way up until then. And we were like, are we blowing all of our money and driving our asses across the country to do this project with someone we've never fucking met? We were like, this is a risk we are taking. And we literally we were talking about that in the van, and we were like, what do we do if it's just like not a match? And we were like, we have to address this thought because it is and was a possibility. And we were just like, you know, we're just going to have to tell him, and we're going to have to like turn our asses around and drive home. Like, we're not going to sacrifice the record if we're not gelling. Our biggest fear was we were going to show up after all that money and all that driving, and it was just going to be like, you know, all the stuff he was saying was bullshit. And he really is just a guy that like presses record and is like, ooh, like has opinions on amps, but like the input ends there. That was our biggest fear. Like, we wanted someone to like pull these songs apart with us, have input, you know what I mean? So we get there and it's like everything seems cool. And then we start opening up like the first song. I think the first song we worked on was Further. And okay, so we like tracked demo recordings or whatever, and then he was like, okay, give me a minute, like I'm thinking of something. And he had us like leave the room for a minute, and then we came back and he was like, okay, I'm thinking something like this. And he literally came up with there's like a part where it's going into the second verse and everything cuts out, and then there's like a synth thing or something that's like, and then the like vocals come in, and he doesn't bring the full band in until like a moment, and it's like a drop, and it's just like really fucking sick, and none of us would have ever come up with that. And I was like, yes! And we were like, this is the guy! Like, we were so happy and relieved. And we're like, okay, if this guy keeps having input like this, then we're golden. And he did continue to have input like that. So,
oh, that's awesome. If you're an audio engineer or musician that's dedicated to creating and releasing new music consistently, then you already know that process can be long, complex, and often expensive, especially while you're trying desperately not to sacrifice the type of quality that is crucial for your mixes to stand up to those big budget productions. Producer and friend of the record process, Jay Moss, has reimagined these roadblocks to quality that plague us all. With the help of world-renowned sound engineers, Jay developed an AI-based platform called Master, which offers you the ability to quickly upload your song and receive a high-quality mastered edition in minutes, all at a price point that won't break the bank with each new mix revision. The platform also allows you to easily collect feedback from clients and collaborators, and it even caters to the perfectionist in us all by allowing you to quickly compare and contrast different iterations of each track as you make those final subtle tweaks. So for a limited time this season, you as a Record Process listener can not only try Master for free, but you can also receive a 20% discount on your first membership by using the code PROCESS on their website at checkout. So hit the link in our show notes or visit maastr.io for more info. So a lot of people think that Oxford Pennant makes, well, pennants. You know, the triangular wool flag type things that usually have like a sports team's logo or the name of a place printed on them. Well, to be honest, that is what I thought too before my band The Wonder Years had the chance to work with them. Through that process, we realized just how much care they put into their beautifully crafted, iconic keepsakes that remind us who we are and why we do what we do. They've teamed up with some massive artists in the process, bands like My Chemical Romance, Wilco, and 21 Pilots, just to name a few. And they even offer custom shop orders for artists, companies, and unique events or special occasions. So please do yourself a favor and head over to oxfordpennant.com and use the code RECORD15 to receive 15% off your first retail purchase from their web store. So did you you said like you were hoping that he would help tear the songs apart and like rebuild them and kind of elevate them and offer some pretty substantive feedback on them. Did you have some like pre-pro days scheduled out there before you started hitting the tracking session?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we he had us like I think play all the songs first, and he was like recording them, and then we I think pulled apart one song at a time where we would just like sit down and talk about just like structure. Or actually he would ask, we'd all sit down, have a little powwow, and he would ask me about like lyrically like what it was about and stuff. And so we'd talk about that, and he was like, okay, like he just wanted to have context of like the mood and just like everything. I don't know. Big brain stuff.
That's fair. It's very important. Tom and I love that. That's probably why we started this podcast, honestly, if we're putting our full nerd hats on. But yes, so I love it. Sounds like my kind of guy.
Nice. Yeah. He's fucking amazing. But so we would talk about that a little bit. And from there, I think we would get into the structure. And that's where like we really liked pulling things apart. Honestly, a great example of him fucking around with structure is literally on our tour with y'all, with the Wonder Years. We played one of the songs. It's called Waking Up. And I've seen like videos of us from that tour playing the song, and it's so crazy listening to it now because I'm like, oh my God, like Mike helped us with this structure and like all this different stuff. And it's crazy how the song has changed. But yeah, so then we do structure stuff. And then after that, I think he would like start adding cool things like what I just described. Like, oh, how about the band cuts out here? And then, stuff like that.
Do you happen to remember how the
changed?
Structure changed? Yeah.
Well, I remember a big melody change. He would fuck with my melodies a lot too, which was amazing. Because I didn't even realize that like a weak point of mine is like I'll write a melody that just uses like the same like 3 notes over and over again. And he would be like, okay, I feel like right here there needs to be a melody change. And then we'd like write something different. I know a specific example for that. In Arm's Length, the melody used to be something, I'm forgetting my own lyrics, but it was like selective memory, flipping through the casualties. And that's literally just 2 notes back and forth. And then he changed it to like selective memory, flipping through the casualties, which is just like so much better. And that's such a part in the song now that people like enjoy. And then for Waking Up, there was like a second verse we added or something. We added a second verse, and then I think I was literally writing the lyrics for it like in the studio, which is crazy. Normally I need way more time to come up with lyrics. I wish I could. If I like watched both back to back right now, I could tell you exactly what changed, but
we can dig into that a little bit more, maybe on a follow-up segment.
Cool.
There you go. But that's so great. I mean, that you were playing that and that you weren't afraid, even though you had already played that song live, which also I'm a huge proponent of. If you get the opportunity, what comedians do all the time, writing on stage, workshopping material, see how it feels in front of an audience, right? What I mean? Like, hey, what we thought was great and was going to be a massive pop. It's not doing what it needs to. And then by the time you get to the studio, you're like, well, just because it has been that way doesn't mean it has to be immortalized that way, And so I love that flexibility. That's super important, especially to play into the strengths of somebody like Mike, who's ready and willing to be there.
The thing is, like, I feel like sometimes artists are afraid of being open like that. But the thing that made me not scared of it is like, you can just say no. Like we can bring it to the drawing board, and then if all the ideas are dog shit, just say no, and then you can stick to it. But there's no harm in trying to open it up. You know what I mean?
Try everything twice. Once because you'll hate it because it's different, and then the second time around, give it a real. Everybody leans in, and you're like, okay, fine. I didn't do it that way, but now I know what you're talking about. And that's when, like, if a band, everybody's like actually tries to commit and make it work the second time, and then maybe if you're like, well, let's try it a third time. Mm-hmm. And then if you get to that like fourth time, or you're being like, I think we're sold.
Yeah. I remember, it's funny you say that because it's funny how like pitching ideas can kind of be mind games sometimes within a band. But I remember, I wish I could remember which parts it was for, and I don't. But I remember there were things that I had like sent in the band chat before I realized that pool kids can only write in a room together. There were things that I sent that got like not a great like reaction. And then I would repitch the same exact thing in the studio after they had forgotten about it. And they were like, oh yeah, that's sick. And I'm like, like you knocked this like 6 months ago.
And you're like, and here's the text message and
Yeah.
screenshot to prove it, you idiot.
Exactly. And here's the receipts.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Also, I feel like I'm actually triggered, Tom. There's definitely like Wonder Years stuff where I'm just like, oh, I gotta figure out how to convince them to keep the hook this length. They want to cut it. No, don't cut it.
Yeah.
How do I work out this math problem? Who do I need? It's literally like trying to whip votes in Congress. I'm just like, who do I have to pay off to just keep this transition the way it is? And it's, I mean, it like, and that's the thing too. It's in the moment you think that one last thing is a hill you'll have to die on forever. And when I think back about like through all our records, and I'm sure you the same thing with Pool Kid stuff, I'm like, how many of those things was I sure would ruin the song, the album, and just like whatever? And they never did. It never mattered. By the time the record's done, mixed, mastered, I've forgotten about it because that was 2 years ago when we started writing that. And I was like, no, that's never going to work. I hate it. I literally hate it. There's so many of those that have made it on the record and I just play them every night and don't think about it.
Yeah. There's one hill that I remember and I chose not to die on it. I was like, everyone has had to sacrifice things. I was like, I can have, I will make this sacrifice. And it was at the end of the first song on the album, Conscious Uncoupling. I really, really wanted, I can hear it in my head. I remember exactly what it was. It was like, I don't know, for anyone that knows the song, it's at the part where it's like, and I'm not acting out of spite, you just couldn't play your cards, right? And then I want it to go into this halftime, like where it uses the same chords, but it's just I don't know. And it was just like this halftime thing. And then after that, it would go into the deedly 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 part. But I was outvoted they said cut out the halftime thing and just go straight to the hype thing. And I still don't know. Which would have been better.
You know what? If it makes you feel better, you can send us the halftime part.
Yeah.
If you have it in a demo somewhere, and that can be a super secret. Like, Tom, we've never discussed this, but maybe we do a hidden track on the podcast and we just make this episode like, I don't know, like 3.5 hours long. It ends after an hour, and at the end,
and it's like, just 2 hours of and
it's just like the halftime part that never made it on there.
Never made it, and that's when it finally gets to see the light of day.
Oh, alternate reality, the upside down, if you will.
Christine, it's really funny. Like we on this season so far, we had a couple different episodes with people writing like solely by themselves, and it was like totally just in their head, and it was like from soup to nuts, like just everything like in their head. So this is, I at least find this really interesting, that this is the complete antithesis of this, where like it's a true, like, I don't want, if we're rolling with democracy thing and whipping votes, it's a true democracy, like a band democracy moment, to give to the song rather than give to, like, I don't want to say ego, but like,
no, but yeah, that's
the
whole
self.
thing. Yeah.
Serve the song, not your ego. It's on the back of my whiteboard over there, Tom, for a completely unrelated IG live that I did over there. You know I would.
You would like, no, I was gonna say you would. That's like Mike Vernon Davis's like primary thing. Oh, you know what? You said what was the moment you realized you wanted to work with him? He kept like drilling home the like serve the song, like, you know, serve the song, knock the ego. And I think that was the first time we had like heard that. Now I know it's like a common thing, but we were like, yeah, exactly. We were like, this is the guy. Probably every producer ever says that, but at the moment that was what hooked us, and it ended up being right.
Hell yeah.
Not all of them. Well, he beat me to it, but it is on my whiteboard. And so if we ever have him on, I'll put it up on the whiteboard in the back. Tom already saw it. I got it today. I was very excited about it. But
did the whole Charlie Day meme.
I really did. It was very embarrassing. And I'm glad that this has now become a part of that episode. But I looked great doing it, and that's okay. On we go.
Marking that.
Right. Yep. There we go. Thanks, Tom. Great.
Yep,
so that one's not going to escape me. That's going to be part of the promo assets for this episode is
amazing.
That. But more importantly, yes, it sounds like what Mike was saying to y'all about that is huge. That's the perfect example of it that you just described, Christine. And there have been plenty of times where I'm like, you know what? If I'm looking around, even if it's 50-50, it's like at least half of the band here thinks it's a good idea. That like the thing that I'm not sold on. So it can't be 100% bad, right? So, and I always think about it from this end where it's just like, okay, cool, you can go die on that hill, but just remember, if half of your band, like in this case, Wonder Years, that's 3 people. You know, if 50% of your band really likes it, do the math and extrapolate. That means that like in all like hypothetically, you know, statistically speaking, there's a good chance that maybe, I don't know, half of your existing fans would really dig it, right? You know, on the flip side, maybe half really wouldn't and would side with you. But just know it's like, it doesn't mean that it's not no, I'm right, 100% of people will hate this, you know? So it's always an interesting dynamic and to kind of remind yourself of that. And ultimately, if you have someone and pull someone in like Mike or put them in that, you know, that producer role and are there to trust them, then trusting that input at times like that is really big because they are the one, especially for bands that write together, they're kind of the last one that has that extra bit of objectivity, right? Because they don't have, I don't like saying dog in the fight because for obvious reasons, it's a horrible image, but they are the ones that they have no stake in getting their idea across the finish line over another one, or at least I don't think they should. I don't think that's healthy in that role. So yeah, it's like if you can look outside of it, it can be really hard to pull back your involvement, especially if you're the one that wrote it, right? You know, because it came to you specifically, you know, which meant you inherently and instinctually thought it was a good idea. So I think that's a really important place to say it, and I think it's a great sign that you know. Your instincts were right in trusting them about working with him and spending the money and time and doing the drive. And I think that's, you know, stepping outside your comfort zone in that way, even just like going far away out of state, doing the travel and, you know, putting the money and time and investment into something like that can be really scary, but it can really pay off in moments like that too, which is awesome.
It can probably also really backfire, but it's like, you know what it is? It's like high risk, high reward. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Totally. You gotta punch those lottery tickets. You gotta buy the lottery tickets if you want to win, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
So while y'all were in the studio, you did you were picking apart the songs pre-production, and then did y'all jump right into tracking and tracking, mixing all in the same process, or was
okay, I think we did all the pre-pro main structural changes, I want to say, and then I know we went into we recorded scratch tracks after we got the structure. I think this is all tentative, I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure we did pre-pro on all the songs, fucked with the structure, recorded scratch tracks of all of them. And then I know we started with recording rhythm section, drums and bass. And I think that took 2 weeks or something. Then we did guitars. We went to another studio, did guitars. Then I think realized we were taking too long. And then we actually split up and did this really stressful, I was doing vocals in one studio while Andy and Caden were doing just making weird sounds and doing weird percussion stuff. Caden was literally dragging trash cans from the street inside and slamming them on the ground, which did make it into the record.
Amazing.
Where on the record can we find said sound?
It is in Swallow.
No. Okay, fantastic.
I think it's at the trash can. Yeah,
it sounds like you're describing a major key Slipknot song, but with a trash can.
Yeah, it really does.
I love it.
Yeah, so they were doing like that shit and sending us videos, which was hilarious. Oh, there's also Caden dragged in like one of those like divvy scooter things from outside and like dinged the bell. And that is in Almost Always Better, Almost Always Worse, the little bell ding from the scooter. So they were doing that while I was like punching the wall, like trying to get good vocal takes and getting
sweating
frustrated.
it out in the trenches, bearing your soul.
Yeah, literally. And then Nicolette was in the same studio as me and was doing like also random shit, like theremin, like fucking with a keyboard, you know, like just random shit. And so we were just like all, doing that. Yeah.
So you're dividing and conquering,
yes.
Whether it's trash cans or vocals.
Yeah.
And you're getting it all done, right? The finish line is in sight. And then we come to the twist.
Okay, there's one more studio shift before the twist. So we were doing all that stuff. Vocals were like, I guess, almost done. And then we moved studios again to the third studio. And that is where we started, honestly, just experimenting with even more. There was like this crazy inventory of instruments. It was just a wild place.
Different size trash cans. Yeah, totally.
Different set. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was like this baritone kalimba that like you can only get. I grew so attached to it. It's also in Swallow. We were up very late tracking vocals to Pathetic, the final song of the album. Having such a good time. Very long night though. And we finished at maybe 3 a.m. and we all went to bed. We were sleeping in the studio. There's like accommodations for that. So the studio's downstairs in the basement. The assistant producer, this is a key detail, slept on the couch in the basement, which is where the studio is. Everyone else went upstairs to go to sleep. Next thing I know, I'm, sleeping, and I wake up to Jake, again, the assistant engineer who's downstairs, just saying in a very soft, careful voice, "Hey guys, bit of an emergency situation." And Nicolette had her AirPods in and Andy was like snoring too loud to be woken with this nonsense. And so it was just me at first. And I was like, whoa, like what's going on? What's going on? This is only 2 hours after we went to sleep, by the way. This is like 6 a.m. We went to bed at like 4 or something. No, went to bed at like 3, woke up at like 4:30 or 5 or some shit like that. And I was like, what? And he was like, so the studio is flooding. And I was just like, oh, okay, let's wake Andy up. Andy's like immediately in like dad mode, try to like fix it. We all go downstairs. It's like inches of water. We ask him, first of all, like, how did you wake up? Also, thank God you're not dead, because there's so much electrical stuff. He could have we literally could have lost him. Like he could have walked through and gotten like electrocuted or however that shit works. And he said that he was sleeping and then, what was it? I don't know if it was the sound of the rain or like what. Oh, I think he got up maybe to pee or something and then just like felt like wetness and then like opened the door, and that's when the water, it was like starting to, I don't know, whatever. And he was confused. And yeah, then he like marched his way all the way through, like clear across the whole like studio, comes upstairs, tells us. We go downstairs. We just have this crazy like nervous energy. Like Andy's trying to figure out what like electrical stuff he has to like shut off or whatever to make sure no one else is at risk of dying. And we call the guy that's like in charge of like running the studio or whatever. He comes over. We all have this sinking feeling that it's somehow our fault. Like we like don't know if we left like, who knows, something on, or I don't know. Luckily it was not our fault. And it was like, storming outside, obviously. Yeah. And we just have this nervous energy and start literally taking buckets and like shoveling water. There's like a video of us just shoveling water out the door, which was so useless. Like it was inches of water, you know what I mean? Like our buckets aren't going to do shit. And it was actively filling up too. So like getting deeper or whatever. So it was just futile, but we just start doing that. Oh, obviously the gear, our minds immediately are like, oh my God, like what is ruined? And luckily all of the guitars our guitars and basses were fine. They happened to be sitting on couches. None of them were like laying on the floor, thank God. Also, we're letting Nicolette sleep peacefully through this because we were just like, let's not ruin her life right now. But when I did wake her up, I was like, hey Nicolette, like the studio's flooded. We've lost a lot of gear. Your bass is fine. Or before I said anything, I was like, your bass is okay. Your bass is okay. And I was just like, everything else is fucked though.
Oh, no. That's honestly a very good way. Just be like, before I tell you what's going on, just know your bass is fine.
Yeah.
Everything else, though.
Yeah. But because it was like a really nice bass that like her dad gave her and all this stuff. And that would have been one of the biggest tragedies if we did lose that bass. But anyways, so the drums were submerged. Andy's JMP was submerged. That ended up being fine somehow. Just because like, the important stuff is at the top of the amp board. It's like a combo. Yeah. So it was just like, it still feels like it's heavier though than it was before. Like I'm still convinced there's water in there making it like heavier. But anyway, this is the part that traumatizes me the most. So I see my pedal board. Okay, this is so much easier to describe this way. So you see how there's like that line in the middle?
Yep.
And so the water was like up to here. And so I'm thinking, but I'm thinking, okay, there's hope because like if it's not past this crack, then so I just like, this is like my first move as soon as I get down there and I'm like looking at all the shit. I just see my pedal board. I see the water line and I'm like, oh, my pedals. And I like slosh over there and go to pick it up and the pedal board was not closed. So I opened it up and watched it fall face first. All of my pedals face first into the water. It literally would have been fine.
Oh no.
I could have saved them. And then I tried to go over there and watch them all. And then, oh God, this is just so sad. They literally just watch me like literally scrambling. I'm like digging up. I can't carry them all at once. I'm like scrambling just to pick one by one all of my shit up. I'm like soaking wet at this point in this freezing cold water. And I'm just like, no, like screaming, crying, like trying to like, whatever. And like eventually I get them all like upstairs and I'm just, like blowing in them and just doing whatever the fuck, like, So the pedal thing happened. I wish I had a list of all the amps, the guitars were fine, the drums were fucked. And so apparently, also like the studio's gear was like fucked. They had, just everything that wasn't above ground was ruined. But there were rugs that were ruined that were apparently the most expensive thing in the entire studio. So we ended up spending the next day like dragging these. And I don't know if you've ever tried to carry a wet carpet or like rug, but it's like the heaviest thing imaginable. And there's like pictures of Andy and I like trying to like drag this like sack of just like, mold and carpet like to the whatever. Anyway, so that was horrible. We ended up spending like, we had to find serial numbers for all the gear because they were trying to get the insurance to like cover stuff. So we spent the next like 2 days like, or I don't know how long, digging up serial numbers, dealing with insurance stuff, like logistics, having these people come by with like industrial fans to like air out the studio. Like, but that's the aftermath. I guess I won't jump to that yet. But yeah, it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating and honestly like traumatizing. I remember going through it and just the emotional like roller coaster of like recording a record and then having something like that happen. We were just so depressed, like so quickly. Like we were on such a high and then it was just like, oh my God, like it cannot get worse than this type like feelings.
Well, I mean, like besides all the gear, how did the recordings are fine?
So thank God Mike had said much earlier in the process, he was like, he gave us like an emergency copy. He was like, I've learned my lesson in the past. Like this needs to be kept somewhere else. And we had it like in our van or something. But even still, the recording was actually fine anyway. It did not get destroyed in the flood. It was above water. Yeah. So we did not actually lose the record.
Amazing.
Yeah. The real loss was the time. We had like 3 days left or something in the studio. And we were at a point where like some of the songs were like broken, like they were not, like they needed fixing and they needed work. And we had 3 days left, which would have been enough. 3 long marathon days, we could have fixed the songs, we could have finished the whole record. But instead, those 3 days were spent airing out the studio, like dealing with insurance, like, we had to we didn't do a GoFundMe, but we had a friend design like a shirt and we sold the shirt, and everyone in the Wonder Years donated, and we remember that, so thank you. But did that, and it was just like we ended up, I think like the last day or so, doing this like makeshift studio upstairs where we had like computer speakers and just Mike's like laptop, and like we were just doing whatever we could. And we did end up having to fly or drive. I don't remember if we flew or drove. Probably flew. Fly across the country again months later to finish the record because it like wasn't done, and we could have finished it. So just more money down the drain. But
okay, so after all that, the songs survived in that form, and you had to tap back in and reschedule, which you had to do it all over again, which we've had to do that for a couple records, or even just send a few people out or to another studio like months later. Cause I feel like this is a pretty common thing. You think you have enough time, you never do, right?
Never.
And especially not when a flood takes the rest of that time away. There's always some sort of a hurdle. This was a horrific one for anybody that's ever been in a studio. I'm sure for the studio owners, everybody. But the good news is that clearly, because we're here talking about it and have had the chance to enjoy it, that you were able to get it done against all odds, maybe not in the most seamless way possible, but I'm sure in some way y'all are a better tight-knit band, and that is an experience that you will share. And I'm sure, like you said, it's, that roller coaster of emotions, that plummeting, feeling, but then feeling like, okay, cool. There's a bunch of people that are here to lift us right back up, help us out, donate, whatever it might be, that want to hear it, to come out of that valley. And I mean, the proof is in the record that, I think there's clearly a lot of people that were very happy that you did finish it, make that trek. And nothing good comes easy, I guess is an easy way to put that. But so let's wrap then by talking about when you finally did finish it, right? Did Mike mix it as well, or who ended up mixing the record?
Yeah. Okay. Mike mixed it and then someone else mastered it.
Okay, cool. And what was that, so like you have it all together. And then where did, the kind of like the finalizing artwork come in? Yeah.
That's the best part of the whole. Oh my God. So it was in Seattle in the Hall of Justice, which was the same studio we like started in. It's like Mike's like home studio or like his like home base, like that's his studio. And that's also where we track drums and bass. So where we started it, and that's also where we finished it. And he just like arranged, all the couches and stuff to face the speakers, like in the right spot. And then like we bought some like champagne and stuff, and we just like shut all the lights off with the whole crew, which is Sam Rawson, Jake, the assistant engineer, Jake Barrow, and Mike, and then the 4 of us. So that's like the whole crew. And we just sat in the dark and like listened to it from like start to finish, like in silence, except for like there was a couple times where Sam heard something that like he hadn't heard, because he came in to save us after the flood. Mike was like, we can only get through this if Sam Rawson is here. So that's when Sam came and he fit right in. So there was some stuff that he hadn't heard yet. And so there was a couple of him being like, oh, like, stank face type shit. Other than that, it was like silence. And it was just like, I think most of us, if not all of us, have said that was like one of, if not the best like moment in like all of our lives, was like hearing the record back for the first time. And I remember Mike saying, we just had this big like heart to heart afterwards, like in the dark after hearing it. And I remember Mike being like, I know this sounds dramatic, but I feel like I could die right now and be fine with that. Cause like, this is just, and we all just agreed. We're like, this is like the whole reason why we do all this shit. And like, it's so many sacrifices you have to make to pursue like, a creative thing like this. And we were just, I was just feeling like, oh my God, like, I'm glad, like all the years that we've been working up to this, sacrifices we've made, I'm like, this is worth it. Like, it was all like for this. And it was just a feeling of like, I don't even care how it does. I don't care how it's received. Like, I am just so proud that we've made this and that we love it, even if no one else loves it. And luckily, a lot of other people are loving it too, which is great. But
that's not the case. Yes. Well, that is the case, actually, that a lot of people are thoroughly enjoying it. Man, Tom, I think we got to wrap. I'm getting goosebumps from that. It's great. Picturing that like listening party in the dark with champagne. Dude, I gotta make some calls. We've never done that with Evitz or any record. I mean, there's like a high five and like, whatever, but it's like, I don't think, also what it is. Were you listening to you were listening to the final mixes then, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, see, yeah, we're always like either end up being back at home at that point or on tour. Actually, no, to be fair, shocker here, foreshadowing, No Closer to Heaven, Tom, that Phil Nicolo did mix. That was the one time we actually went in to the studio and did finished attended mix session. So that's the closest we ever gotten, but it was nothing near what you have just described, Christine. That was incredible.
I feel like there's a kid show that's like the word of the day. What's the word of the day? Was it I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I feel like the word of this episode is almost like juxtaposition. Like there's
Can you spell that for the viewers, Tom?
Absolutely not. I'm so bad at spelling. Going back even to like the songwriting process, like how you like had the juxtaposing
the complexities
processes.
Yeah.
So it just and how that overall shaped, and like even though the situation was tremendously shitty, that there was a giant flood,
it made the payoff better.
Yeah. So I don't wish that literally on anyone, but for this release, maybe there was a certain like je ne sais quoi to it that just like made it a little bit more special.
Well, there actually are just really quickly at the very end of the record that we took recordings of us, like Caden took a video of us walking through the water in the flood, like when we were first discovering it. And we took a soundbite of us like sloshing through and it's, if you listen on the last song, is everything, the whole record's like ringing out. You hear us like walking through the water at the flood. So that's like a fun.
Whoa. Dude. Okay. Mind blown emoji.
I know.
Dropping that bomb. I'm going to go back and listen immediately. Yeah. I'm going to look for it. And everybody should too. Christine, this has been so wonderful. Where can everybody listen to this record and keep up to date on all things Pool Kids and find you and keep up with what you're doing? Everything's on poolkidsband.com. Christine Goodwin, what a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Well, that was quite a remarkable way to finish off this season 4 track listing. It's just a true testament to the fact that things do not always go as planned when you're in the studio. And that's part of the whole creative process. Because I think at the heart of it, the idea of creativity is not necessarily just making art, but creativity is really problem solving and figuring out who are the best people to help you solve the problems that you face in trying to make great art that conveys a story, a message, and has a weight to it that will resonate with people. And as music makers, the only way we get there is by saying yes to whatever might lie ahead of us. By finding the determination to say, we will find a way over, under, around, or through this obstacle. Because really, it's the highs, it's the lows, and it's the time we spend bouncing between them as we make music that affords us the perspective and the courage to keep saying yes to the next chapter. Maybe it's assembling the bravery to step back into the studio, even after life may have thrown some serious trauma at you, and finding the resolve it takes to unpack those thoughts for the world to hear. Or it might be finding the power to keep walking on stage every night into the uncertainty of what might happen next. And it's also the strength to continue seeking out what comes next, and to continue writing your story note by note, line by line, song by song, one record at a time. So make sure you subscribe and follow the show, and we'll be back to pick up the story before you know it with a brand new season of
The Record Process.